Hello, welcome to another edition of Issues with Jide. Here we talk about actions and inactions of those who shape our national landscape and political landscape and how they impact us positively or otherwise. I'm Ibrahim Shita. Today on the show, President Buhari accuses service chiefs of poor performance as NSA attacks El-Rufai. And later on the show, APC, PDP trade words as APC pegs presidential nomination form at 100 million naira. In the course of the program, we'll take your questions, but first, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and drop your questions in the comment section. Joining me via Zoom, the maestro himself, Babajide Kolade-Otitoju. Good afternoon or good evening, precisely. All right, Biko, let's start with the news of the transition of the Alafia for your Obalamidi Adeyemi III. How did you receive this news, Biko?
Just through the usual channel. We live in the era of the preeminence of the new media. So I got the information via the new media. I then made efforts to validate the information through my usual channels. Once I was convinced that the legendary traditional ruler had passed on, I then communicated this to my friends and colleagues.
Right. We pray to Almighty God to grant him a peaceful repose and give his family and the people of your state fortitude to bear his laws. Right, let's get to talking about the topic for today. President Muhammad Buhari told the security agencies that they were not doing enough to end the security challenges in the country. So despite enormous logistics provided by this administration, is this an indictment on the service chiefs?
Yes, not just the service chiefs, but on everyone who duty it is to protect us as a people. The service chiefs, the other subheads of our national security, they are all to blame for the mess that we have found ourselves in. In the past, the president could simply gloss over these things and even heap praises on the service chiefs, on the Inspector General of Police, but I think even the president is tired of coming out to defend or appear to defend his appointees. His appointees have failed spectacularly to provide security for our people. And if the president is saying this to them, then it shows that in his heart of hearts, he knows that not only have the people who head security in our country failed, his own government has failed in the area of providing security for our people. It can no longer be denied. People can be called names because they chose to speak the truth. They chose to highlight the problems facing our nation. But simply abusing people or pretending that problems are not there will not solve the problem. What will solve the problem is the approach to defeating it. If we have a banditry in the Northwest, what will put it to death is the appropriateness of the strategies deployed. If we do not deploy the right strategies, of course, banditry will remain with us a lot longer. The approach has to be better. The strategies deployed has to be better. And the people whose duty it is to provide security for our country have to be up and doing. So the president has openly criticized them, has openly said, look, I provided logistics, I provided what you need to succeed. But what we have falls short of expectation. So The president was not used to saying this when we had the former service chiefs. He allowed them to stay in office longer than necessary for reasons best known to the president, because there was nothing unusual that those set of service chiefs did. The president extended their stay and even went against the constitution to keep them in office. Some of them were above 60 years, and the president needlessly kept them in office. So this whole rot began from the former set of service chiefs. But this is the first time that we are hearing from the president that you have not done enough. In spite of all that we have provided, you have not done enough. And I'm sure that the president didn't want to say this publicly because he felt he could even further demoralize the armed forces. So he said it to the hearing of the service chiefs, the IG and the rest of them. But when pressmen now spoke with the National Security Advisor, he conveyed the disappointment of Mr. President in their work, in the work of the NSA himself. He conveyed the disappointment of Mr. President to journalists who posed questions to him. So I think the approach of the president to an extent was right. He didn't want to openly condemn them, you know, because of the way that could be interpreted. But as we have always said, he has not challenged the people that he has given responsibilities enough. There ought to be key performance index. If Nigeria was a business enterprise, of course, it will be run better than this. But everyone is just acting like, oh, this does not belong to me. Let me just do my bit and get away. No, that cannot engender positive nation building. We've got to address the problems. Once we can see that these problems are there, we have to address them. That is, and the president talked about the attack on the train. Of course, that remains one of the most embarrassing attacks that we have seen in recent times. But of course, just some days back, Boko Haram attacked Gaydam. Gaydam is the hometown of the Inspector General of Police. That is the second time that Gaydam will be attacked since the Inspector General of Police was appointed. So they attacked Gaydam and slaughtered hotel guests. So that is a Boko Haram that we continue to tell people has been degraded, has been rendered almost powerless. Their members are surrendering in droves, but is still capable of attacking a big town and slaughtering people like rams, slaughtering hotel guests like rams, and even going to the point of burning down a government building. So we still have a lot to do in the area of security. We've got to tell ourselves the truth. And the president shouldn't just stop at criticizing these people. He has to give them marching orders. And once he gives them marching orders and he sets targets, realizable targets for them, if they cannot meet his target, then he should let them go. Mr. President is the person who will appoint people to positions, and even when they fall short of expectations, he keeps them there. That has to change. Because as I've said to this president repeatedly, his administration will be signposted, his administration will be remembered largely for the insecurity that pervades our land. He can build trains in the sky. He can provide infrastructure 3 times better than previous leaders before him. I'm not suggesting that that's what is done. Yeah. But I'm saying that he can provide infrastructure even 3 times better than the presidents before him. If he does not defeat the insecurity that is ravaging our land, that is taking the lives of our people, that is getting our children to not feel comfortable to go to school, it is by that insecurity that his administration will be remembered. There's just no two ways about it. I'm a historian. I know that we've had leaders who did well for their people, not just in Nigeria, but certain little things for certain little indiscretions.
All right.
Those leaders have been pushed into the dustbin of history.
Yeah, you're correct. But when the NSA was asked about why the government has not deployed the use of technology to tackle insecurity, it submitted that the required technology was expensive and would take time to acquire and not sure about who to buy from. So the question is, this issue of insecurity has lasted years, and this government is still window shopping for what to use. How does this, add up?
I really don't know what it's talking about. Security has gone beyond what our NSA is saying or is talking about. We need drones. Drones that can monitor the dangerous areas in our country. Drones that can serve not just the purpose of reconnaissance, the purpose of surveillance, the purpose of early warning. Drones that can deliver weapons to take care of the enemy. And I've talked in the past about the fact that there are drones being made these days that can stay airborne for up to 2 weeks. There are drones being made these days that thrive on solar, that use solar power. Yet these are unmanned area vehicles. So the risk of losing personnel is not even there. We can't have people go abroad all the time, but are incapable of sourcing from abroad the best technology that we need to improve security in our country. So we need those drones. We need ground attack helicopters. We keep talking about the fact that the Tucanos are not being used in the Northwest. I've said it before, that we will not use Tucanos in the Northwest. Whether we declare bandits terrorists or not, we will not use Tucanos in the Northwest. And I'm happy that something that I repeated on this program and on Journalist Hangout, the spokesman for the Mr. President has come out to say, yes, we will not use Tucano in the Northwest because that will breach the conditions upon which the Tucanos were sold to us. But it is not only Tucanos that can deal decisively on the enemies of the Nigerian state.
Yeah.
I have said that if we look back at the way countries before us, like Sri Lanka, like Cambodia, like Colombia, have tackled insurgency, we can look at some of the weapons deployed. Former President Obasanjo has advised us that we should learn from Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka defeated terrorism and defeated it decisively. Tamil Tigers harassed Sri Lanka for more than 20 years. But the armed forces of Sri Lanka dealt decisively with Tamil Tigers, and Tamil Tigers were defeated to the last man. Let no one tell you that insurgency, especially the type that Boko Haram is known for, cannot be defeated. Anyone who says that does not know history and needs to go and learn a lot more.
Right. Terrorism
has been defeated and can be defeated. But the approach has to be right. The equipment that we use has to be the right equipment. The soldiers must show greater commitment, because as far as the president is concerned now, the commitment does not match the infrastructure and the logistics provided. That's what the president is saying.
Yeah.
And it cannot be far from the truth.
Right. Biko, let's also x-ray further what the NSA said. Talking about the fallout of the meeting, said it denied criticizing Governor Nelson El-Rufai for divulging too much classified information, which it claimed was indirectly helping terrorists re-strategize as well as endanger those in captivity. Let's quickly take a listen, and then we'll take your reaction.
Governor Nasser El-Rufai spoke about the security agencies saying we know who they are, where they are. And again, that is the danger when you start talking too much. You give away a lot. I agree. Now, even if they say we know where they are, that in itself is already a problem. Because once you say it, whether it is true or false, the person who has your people in captivity will move to another location. It's just as simple as that. So sometimes it's best to just keep silent. Mum is the word.
All right, BKO, what do you make of this?
Yes, it has not been misquoted. It's not been misquoted. It's not the first time that this NSA will say something and then we'll start hearing that, oh, he didn't say it. But there it is in black and white. This is not even elevated interpretative journalism. This is reporting what he said. That this is what happens when you talk too much. I mean, what he was trying to say was that, look, Governor El-Rufai had no reason in the world to disclose that they knew the location of the bandits. During the Jonathan era, one of the generals also said something similar, that don't worry, we know where they are, this and that. And what we did see, the Chibok guests were then redistributed amongst commanders. So by the time the group even broke into factions, you now had the Abanawi faction having more than 100 of the guests, you know, you had the other faction too, having some. So they didn't put them in one location. Terrorists have been able to pick up valuable lessons over the years. Because when you keep them in one location, in the event of military action, they could be rescued. But when you split them up, it makes it extremely difficult to rescue them by a single operation. In any case, it is even advisable to not attempt to rescue them militarily, especially when there are so many as we have seen. The best thing to do is to not allow them to carry out that attack in the first place, because once they've taken people into the bush, they are going to use them as human shields. And once you try to launch a military campaign to set them free, many of those captives are likely to die. And if they die, it will become a massive PR deficit for the government. So people would rather negotiate through third parties. Countries would rather negotiate through third parties and get their people freed.
Right. So, BKO, before we change our topic, Jide is saying that BKO, in the light of the insecurity challenges in the northeast and the fact that Boko Haram has in effect merged with the bandits, do you think it makes sense to constrain the Tukanus to the northeast?
Well, it may not make sense. It may not make sense, but agreement is agreement. As far as the Americans are concerned, terrorism is happening only in the northeast. Remember, they didn't want to sell these weapons to us. We are grateful to President Trump, because during the Obama years, the government flatly refused to sell to us. In fact, when we tried to buy American weapons through third parties, the Obama regime vetoed it. They stopped us from buying, even from third-party countries. So that was why the deal for the Tucanos was not a straightforward one. And remember, there were videos of Nigerian forces are appearing to torture captives and all that on the internet. So these sort of videos that soldiers sometimes record, they should know that they are doing a disservice to themselves, because in future, those videos could get in the way of buying weapons, because they will now claim that if they said to you, you are going to use those weapons on your civilians. As far as they are concerned, at the time the weapons were bought, we only had terrorism happening in the Northeast. And we are told them that, look, we needed it to defeat Boko Haram. Boko Haram was only present in the Northeast. They were not anywhere else at that time. So Boko Haram elements, some of them have fled to work with bandits now. It has now become criminality of a different sort. They are now bandits. They are now people kidnapping strictly for money. They don't have ideology anymore. And to be a terrorist, there has to be an underlying ideology. So it's not everybody that will be convinced that we have branded people terrorists and all that. You can't simply do that and think that you are going to convince everybody. No. Many people will still see them as bandits based on their modus operandi. I am one of such persons. I still see them as bandits based on their modus operandi, despite the fact that some Boko Haram elements have joined them. Some of those who have joined them strictly for the purpose of survival, knowing that they are losing the battle in the Northeast. But what they are doing is strictly banditry, strictly kidnapping people for money. They are not saying give us a state of our own. They are not saying we want an Islamic, we want Islamic theology to reign in the places that we control. No, bandits are not telling you that. A lot of those bandits are not even Muslims. They only bear Muslim names. A lot of them are enemies. So that they've been diluted with Boko Haram still has not changed their modus operandi. And it's their modus operandi that ensures that the definition that fits them perfectly is that of banditry and not terrorism. But if we don't use Tucano, it doesn't mean that we cannot win the war. We need to invest in drones. Absolutely. We need to invest on guard attack helicopters. They will do even a better job than the Tucanos. A lot of the destruction of Boko Haram bases happening in the Northeast is through the use of drones, unmanned area vehicles.
Right. So, Biko, let's change tack quickly. We'll come back to taking some of the the contributions on the YouTube channel. Well, let's talk about the All Progressives Congress, which is in the eye of the storm for selling its presidential nomination and expression of interest forms for 100 million naira, while the PDP puts its presidential form at 40 million naira, even though the ruling party slashed its own by 50% for presidential aspirants under 40 years. What does these portend, or what do these portend?
Well, I am against selling nomination forms for even as high as 40 million. People have said, oh, we want to separate the boys from the men. I do not agree. There are ways by which you can separate the boys from the men. There are shadow elections that can take place that you can actually use, caucus elections, shadow elections that you can use to arrive at aspirants and then eventually candidates of your party. I'm not talking about consensus now. I'm talking about shadow elections where people can actually test their popularity. But telling us that you want young people to get involved in governance while you make the nomination form so expensive, that means you have monetized democracy. You have made money the centerpiece of our politics. You have shut out capable people who may not be rich. Because what we are now saying, what the APC is saying is indirectly, without knowing it, is that look, only people who are rich or whose friends are rich are good enough to contest for the presidential ticket of the party. For APC that came with the mantra of change, I think that change should mean refusing to do those things that the PDP were doing, for which they were condemned. Trying to copy the PDP does not mean change in any way. You've got to depart from the path that the PDP told. If you continue to ape the PDP and you are doing exactly what they are doing, then you are endangering the popularity of the party with the ordinary Nigerians. And Nigerians will think that, look, if they cannot raise money to contest for these elective positions because it has become for the money bag, then it is not everyone's party. I've had some APC leaders say, look, the party belongs to the people. But how many people can afford 100 million in today's difficult Nigeria? So effectively, many people, an overwhelming majority of our people who may be capable and in fact be more capable than some of the people contesting are going to be shut out because the major challenge will be for them to raise this money. How do they get to raise this money? It's not the nomination form of a political party should not constitute a bazaar. They should not be so priced in a manner that the ordinary people cannot will not be able to buy it. When in 2014, President Buhari complained that 27 million was too much, and that he, as a former president or a former head of state, would not be able to raise 27 million. We thought that that under his leadership of the party, under him as the leader of the party, that incrementally the nomination form of the APC, the presidential nomination form of the APC will, in terms of the price, will begin to go down. But what are we seeing? A 370% increase in the cost of the form can certainly not be encouraged. And even for the PDP, who are selling theirs at 40 million, I also think that 40 million is way too high. The only good thing is that it appears that the biggest opposition party in the land has ensured that theirs is not as expensive as that of the APC.
All right. Right, because we don't know exactly how much someone who is holding the office of the president, who is the president of Nigeria, how much they collect, month-on-month basis, and altogether 4 years, let's say 8 years. So we don't know whether that salary amounts to up to 50 million naira. So if someone is going to be the president of Nigeria, and then whatever it is that you're going to take home may not, I'm not sure, add up to that amount, 100 million naira. Are we not encouraging corruption whatsoever? Or do you think it's just a normal thing, where you said it's not even normal in the first place?
Oh, it's abnormal. It's abnormal. It's clear that this is being done to push some people out of the race, to make sure that only the people belong to what I would call the rarefied class, the class of the high and mighty within the party, and muster the courage to even contest. That's what they are trying to do. By this nomination, you have already made sure that people who are not rich or who can find friends who are rich, who can donate 100 million for them, will not be able to contest, because this 100 million is not refundable. You can still pay 100 million and still lose the election. I mean, so what do you then gain at the end of the day? So I mean, young people. I want to see young people, 30-year-olds, 35-year-olds, be able to take part in these elections, and it shouldn't be money that we will use to discourage them or to ensure that they are unable to throw their hearts in the ring. By telling people to bring 100 million, you have clearly made it impossible for us to even reap the benefit of the not too young to rule team. At least at all levels of governance, young people should be able to contest. There's nothing wrong about that. They should be able to contest. We are using money now to block the access to these elective positions. So I'm really disappointed. To go all the way to 100 million was what I never thought could happen. But it's really in Nigeria, nothing shocks us anymore. We are a country in which strange things happen, and people should be ready at any point in time. Something shocking will happen.
All right, BKO, let's quickly go back to our earlier topic where Stanley Maduka says, is asking a question. So what's your take on the reopening of our borders? Don't you think that will worsen the security situation?
I don't think it will worsen anything. We were wasting our time when we closed those borders. It didn't stop insecurity. It didn't stop smuggling. The aims were not achieved. Although if we ask the people who locked up the borders, they will say they achieved their aims. Absolute falsehood. Today, we've been told that our fuel consumption rate, PMS consumption rate, is about 101 million liters a day. And when you ask them why, they will say, oh, a lot of it was down to smuggling. So how were people able to smuggle petroleum products out of our country at a time when we claimed that we locked the borders? Boko Haram, bandits, and other elements using Nigeria's extensive land border with Niger Republic to bring in illicit weapons. They do not use the conventional borders. They use the unconventional entry points. So whether you shut the borders for 1 million years or you keep the borders open, these fellows will find a way to come in. And in Borno North, for example, where Boko Haram still remains active, a lot of custom outposts have already been shot. They are not manned. A lot of immigration outposts are not manned, because we know that these people attack customs men if they can, where they can find them. So I don't think it will make any difference. I really don't think so.
All right, BKO, final thoughts. I've got so many, in fact, so many questions, so many contributions here. And one of them is saying that, BKO, thank you very kindly. Thank you very much for your comment. So far, it's always balanced. Shamsuddin said President Buhari will blame anyone except himself. And so many comments here. Some of them commendations, and some of them saying that we need to be asking questions about whether the current crop of APC today are what used to be the PDP. I wanted to react to that very quickly, and then we go very shortly.
There is little or no difference between the political parties. a situation in which somebody who is extremely reactionary today in the PDP can move straight into the APC and they will be received. And we will be told that, oh, just as Fashola said some time ago, that you don't stop people from coming to church, that you can only stop them from having access to the church offering or whatever. People can move from the PDP to the APC when they like. That has diluted whatever claim to progressivism in the APC. Our parties are not ideologically based, except we are fooling ourselves, except we are deceiving ourselves. There are far too many people who have no claim to being progressives who are in the APC today. For me to begin to see the APC as the party of progressives. No. And even in the PDP, there are people who have traits that make them feel like people should belong to a progressive party. So APC has become open to all comers. All kinds of people can come into the party. So that has diluted the character, the nature of the party to the point that there's little or no difference between it and the PDP. In fact, many people have moved from PDP to APC and back.
Yeah.
You know, they move freely from both from party PDP to party APC to make me even see the parties more or less like cousins.
All right. Well, John Afaha says, thanks BKO for these analyses, more grace and wisdom, always balanced in your discussions. Well done. And that's our show for today's edition of Issues with Jide. Special thanks to you, Babajide Kolade-Otitoju, for those insightful analyses as always, BKO.
Thank you so much for doing this with me.
And thanks to you too, our audience, for joining us on every edition. You can see the program again anytime by subscribing to our YouTube channel, TVC News. Click on the subscribe button to get the latest information. On behalf of the team, I'm Ibrahim Shita. See you again next edition. Bye for now.